Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Fred. Happy birthday to you.
7 little girls sitting in the back seat, hugging and kissing with Fred. I said, why don't one of you come up and sit beside me? And this is what the 7 girls said.
All together now, 1, 2, 3. Keep your mind on your drive and keep your hands on the wheel. Keep your snoopy eyes on the road ahead. We're having fun, sitting in the back seat, kissing and a hugging with Fred. Dee-doo-dee-dum-dum, dee-doo-dee-dum-dum, dee-doo-dee-dum-dum-dum.
Well, it all started back in the early 1950s that I discovered that I was just a little bit hammy. And Jerry McGill and Curtis Rogers and I pretended we were the Kingston Trio or the Crew Cuts, and we would sing for hours the songs of that era. Fast forward to about 55 years when we moved to Marco Island, and I discovered that community theater was something I wanted to try out. And it all started with me being in the lighting crew and then slowly being asked to do various roles. Well, Hammy became part of Fred. It was fun, and I'm still Hammy, so let's enjoy the early days of Fred. I was raised in a little cattle town in central Florida called Lake Wales, Florida. I was born, however, in Chicago, Illinois, because my father had gone to look for a job up in Chicago in 1937. And in that trip up there, little Freddie was born. But we went back to Florida, back to a little town. It's a very small little town back then. And we lived in a 29-foot trailer. Can you imagine? In 1949, it all started to unravel. Because by that time, Doug and Brian, my 2 little brothers, were born. They were 1 and 2 years old, and I was 12. So guess who got to take care of them? In 1949, I was out helping my dad paint our trailer. And he had a bad heart. And so we were out with a spray gun spraying the trailer, and he had a heart attack and died at my feet. And it was devastating, needless to say. But then, as we tried to get our lives back together, my mother he was 40 years old, and my mother was 40 years old, still young. So she had to get a job. My mother got a job with a dancer called Sally Rand, R-A-N-D. She was very famous in the 40s and 50s. And in that period of time, she was a fan dancer. And my mother was a backup dancer with another woman. When I say backup, she was in the back of the stage. Sally Rand was doing her fans and all her stuff, and my mother was in the back. During this time, my mother, being 40 years old and understanding she's still young, she fell in love with Curly. His name was Curly. His name was actually Richard, but his name was Curly, the drummer in the band. And she used to bring Curly home to our little 29-foot trailer on the weekends. Well, you can understand what probably happened during those weekends. And I'm trying to protect Doug and Brian from all of the chatter that went on. And one day my mom says to me, "You don't like Curly, do you?" And I said, "Well, not really." And she said, "Well, I know you miss your dad." And yes, I do. So as a result, about 2 weeks later on Friday when she was supposed to come home, she didn't come home, and Curly wasn't there, and she didn't come home. Saturday came. She hadn't come home yet. So I'm taking care of Doug and Brian. And so then I finally went to the trailer park manager and I said, "Something's not right. My mom hasn't come home from Tampa, Florida yet, and I'm worried." So he called up and he found out that that particular show had already left for Canada for the summer. So there we were, and so he called the authorities and they put us in an orphanage. And that orphanage was in Lakeland, Florida. It was called the Evangelical Child Welfare Agency, which is the agency in which Doug and Brian were adopted through. Back in 1949, the 1 to 2 year olds got adopted, the 12-year-olds did not. So I was pretty much out, and I didn't like the place anyway. So I got my little 2 suitcases and I did what was probably couldn't be done today. I ran away. Simple as that. And went back to Lake Wales, and the trailer park owner that had the trailer park gave me a trailer to live in. I stayed out of trouble because I knew if I didn't, back to the orphanage I'd go. So I tried to be a good boy. One of the things in which I had to kind of have a counter to was that many of the parents of the girls in the class, now I'm about 13, 14 going on, and they didn't like their daughters dating a boy that lived by himself in a trailer. So I had to make sure that I was very good and didn't give any bad impressions to anybody. So that was my biggest hurdle, was the parents and the teachers. One of the jobs I got was in a drive-in theater, and I was in the snack shop, and I would give people their drinks and everything during the intermission. And all in the 1950s, there was one person who was very popular and I fell in love with to be my mom, and that was Doris Day. So one day I was 14 years old and I went home and I wrote her a letter. And I said, and I don't remember if I even got the right address. I said, "I'm a good boy. I'm 14 years old. I don't get into trouble. And would you adopt me?" Well, I didn't hear anything. Fast forward 65 years or so, and I'm mentioning this to Terry. And Terry says, "Oh my God, I know Doris Day's music director." Now remember, she was at the time 28 years old. I was 14 years old. She was 14 years older than I was. She says, so she called Sam Trust is his name, and we got a hold of him. And we started talking with Doris Day, and we started chatting. And now she's in her early 90s, and I'm now in my 70s. So as a result, she sent me this picture of her. So, and this is a picture of her when she was 28 and about the time I sent her the letter. So, another chapter that happened a few years later, when I'm a junior in high school, I went in to get a haircut one day. And to getting that haircut, instead of jumping up into the chair and getting a haircut, I had to wait and read some magazines to wait for the barber. and I'm reading the magazines, and one of them is called Boys Life Magazine. And this Boys Life Magazine had an ad in the back, and it said, we need a waterfront director to teach swimming. It was up in Muskegon, Michigan. So I wrote and I got the job. Well, as a result of that, I went up there and they gave me a tent to live in. And during the summer. And who was my tent mate was a guy by the name of Roger Chaffee. Roger Chaffee was one of the 3 astronauts that died in the Apollo 13 fire up in on the pad in 1972. But his father used to come on the weekends and take us out to dinner, and I used to go along. So at the end of the summer, he said, "Well, Fred, what are you going to do with your last year in high school?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but I got to go back to Florida because I'm up in Michigan now for the summer." And I said, "I got to graduate from high school." So he says, "Aren't you going to go to college?" I said, "What? College? I don't think so." He says, "Well, Roger's going to go to Purdue." And I said, "Well, good for Roger." But I didn't have anything to talk about. So I went back to Florida, and of course everybody at the beginning of their senior year is all excited about where they're going to go to college, and they're excited about it all. And I didn't have anything to talk about except I had this thing in the back of my mind I could go. So I found out that if I went back and became a state student in the state of Michigan, I could get that scholarship because I couldn't use the scholarship and be in Florida and graduate from a high school in Florida. So I got on another Greyhound bus and went up to East Lansing, Michigan, and found a place to live. Now I'm, 17, 18 years old. And of course, I've been living on my own since I was your age. And so it was no big deal. I found a place to live in the basement of a professor's house, and I started just going to school, and I graduated from East Lansing High School. Kind of the odd kid out. Can you imagine you know how it is in school. You get a kid that comes in that he doesn't know I didn't know anybody, and it was a strange year. So anyway, that's how I got. So then I got the scholarship and started at Michigan State. Started going to college, and then in my junior year, I got a job at the AO Pi House, Alpha Omicron Pi. That's a sorority. As the busboy in the sorority, serving meals to the girls. And one day, I came up to the president of the sorority house, and I put her plate down in front of her, and I said, and I whispered in her ear, "Would you go out with me tonight?" And she said, she looked up at me and she said, "Yeah." Well, I almost fainted because I didn't think the president of the sorority house was going to go out with the busboy. Well, anyway, we started dating. That was February. I proposed to her in April and married her in August. And that was my wife for 53 years. I went on to do other things. I graduated from college, went into the service in the Army because I went through the ROTC program, and went into the Army and became a captain in the Army. Got assigned unusually, and this is a hush-hush, no one's supposed to know it, but now you can know it. I got sent to Laos, which was a place in which we weren't supposed to be. There was 20 of us. And in that assignment, I came out, I interviewed the CIA and a bunch of other things, but the long and short of that is I went to work for Alcoa and worked there for 35 years. And at the end, I was in charge of international finance for Alcoa. I was in charge of getting them into the capitalistic type system. So that's what I did. And that's the end of the story.
Wow, quite the story, sir.
Tell me what you want to say to your family, to your daughter, to your son, to your 2 grandkids, to Chris and George, to Celeste and Stan.
Well, I love them all. I mean, they were the cornerstone of my life. Obviously, my children will carry on me for many, many years, and I love them dearly, and I want that to happen. Chris and George and Celeste and Stan, I mean, they were my brothers and my sisters that I never had, so I feel that they are as much a part of me as anything. So to them and to all of my friends, far and here, it's been a wonderful life, and I love it.
Tell everybody about how you met me.
Oh, well, about 5.5, 6 years ago, about 5.5 years ago, I had the good fortune of being invited to an Orphans at Christmas. This was the result of having lost my dearest joy, and some people felt that I needed to have some happiness in my life at Christmas time, so they invited me to a Orphans at Christmas party, of which Terry, who had just lost her sister, who was also very, very close to her, just the year before, was invited, and so we started to see each other as a result of that. Some of it was happenstance, some of it was by design, but it was a time in my life that brought me out of the doldrums and made me realize that life has a meaning and life has some happiness in it, and I will always, always be grateful to what she did to bring me to true happiness as a result of losing joy, and my heart goes out to her, and it will always be with her.
And this is a man who having been deserted at 12 years old, put himself through high school and college, and had a wonderful life, and had a master's degree in finance from Dartmouth, and started the Marco Island Yacht Club, was one of the founders, and was a Commodore, and also founded a bank in Marco Island. And
Helped. I didn't do it all.
Oh, he helped. Okay, helped found a bank. He also helped found the Marco Island Players and the Marco Island Soap Festival. And he was a world traveler. He was head of international finance for Alcoa Aluminum. He
35 years with Alcoa.
Wow, 35 years. And that led him to an early retirement.
59.
That led him right here to Sedona, where I had the great pleasure of meeting him and falling in love with him and spending the rest of our days together. And I'm grateful.
Happy birthday to Happy birthday. Right this way, man. Happy birthday. Cares about the day when we're together. Every year you get a little better. Happy birthday to you. From all of us, your friends. Oh my God.
All together now, 1, 2, 3. Keep your mind on your drive and keep your hands on the wheel. Keep your snoopy eyes on the road ahead. We're having fun, sitting in the back seat, kissing and a-hugging with Fred.
All of them in love with Fred,
Dee-doo-dee-doo-doo,
kissing and a-hugging with Fred.
dee-doo-dee-doo-doo.
Wish that I could be like Fred.
Doo.